Hello, it's me, Salty. Hello, viewers. Hello, VOD watchers. How are we all? It is Wednesday, and I'm going to be reading Brilliance of the Moon. The end, probably. Hopefully I can get through it all in one stream, because I think it's just enough to go over 2 hours. So, yeah, here we go. Also, the cement has been laid outside, so I won't keep getting woken up extremely early by the cement guys wanting to start early. Everyone in Brisbane's just like starting early. It's not the city for me. It's crazy. It's because of summertime. When summertime rolls around, everyone wants to start early and then get done before the heat kicks in. But I digress. Let's have a look. I'll have to check on my order to see where my multicoloured bulb is. I should have bought an Australian one. I didn't realise it was from China. I thought it was from Victoria. I was like, oh no, it's coming from China. I mean, it comes from China anyway. It's just, I would rather it come from stock that is already in Australia because it's quicker. Okay, so yesterday at the start we thought that Takeo was going to be executed by Arai, but Arai is not as... I mean, he is a bit of a bully and, loud warrior kind of stereotype. But it turns out he understood that Takeo was taken by the tribe, and he actually privately told him he really admired his just grabbing K-Day and running off to get married and, being bold and doing what he wants. He says he admired that, but, couldn't say that apparently because he couldn't afford to offend Lord Fujiwara, who has imperial connections. So, although I'm not sure why. Yeah. Anyway, so Arai and Takeo are in alliance now, and because Arai realizes that Takeo can destroy the tribe, and also can help him take and secure Hagi, the Otori capital. So the plan is that Arai will take his forces and distract the Otori outside Hagi, while Takeo will sail in from the sea, which has never been done before apparently. So that's happening there. In the meantime, K-Day is still basically imprisoned by Lord Fujiwara. And so that's where we're going to go in this chapter 10. It's nearly at the end of the book, so I'm hoping to get it finished tonight. And I think that's... Yeah, I think we can probably do it. Okie dokie. Oh, I might have a sip. And then, so I'll do a little bit of a longer stream, and then I'll finish up, and I'll get some sleep tonight. That'd be nice. Looking forward to that. Okay. Brilliance of the Moon, Chapter 10. Rieko's disposition was nervous, and she was as alarmed by the typhoon as she had been by the earthquake. It threw her into a state of near collapse. Despite the discomfort of the storm, Kade was grateful to be free of the woman's constant attention. However, after 2 days, the wind dropped. Clear autumn weather followed, and Rieko recovered her health and strength, along with her aggravating attentiveness. She seemed to find something to do to Kade every day, plucking her eyebrows, scrubbing her skin with rice bran, washing and combing her hair, powdering her face to an unnatural whiteness, creaming her hands and feet until they were as smooth and translucent as pearl. She selected Kade's clothes for her and dressed her with the help of the maids. Occasionally, as a special privilege, she would read a little to her or play the lute, at which, as she let Kade know, she was considered to be highly skilled. Fujiwara visited once a day. Kade was instructed by Rieko in the art of making tea, and she prepared it for him, going silently through the ritual while he followed every movement, correcting her from time to time. On fine days, the women sat in a room that looked out onto a small enclosed garden. 2 twisted pine trees and a plum tree of extreme antiquity grew there, along with azaleas and peonies. "We will enjoy the flowers in the spring," Rieko said, for the shrubs were a dull autumn green, and Kade thought of the long winter that stretched ahead, and after that another and another, reducing her to a lifeless treasure, seen only by Lord Fujiwara. The garden reminded her of the one at Noguchi Castle, where she had sat briefly with her father when he had been informed of the marriage arranged with Lord Otori Shigeru. He had been proud then, relieved that she was to make such a good marriage. Neither of them had known that that marriage, too, would be a sham, a trap for Shigeru. Since she had so little with which to occupy her thoughts, she went over and over the past in her mind while she gazed out on the garden, watching every minute change as the days went slowly by. The plum tree began to drop its leaves, and an old man came into the garden to pick them one by one off the moss. Kade had to be kept out of his sight, as from all men, but she watched him from behind a screen. With infinite patience, he picked up each leaf between finger and thumb, so the moss would not be damaged, and placed it in a bamboo basket. Then he combed the moss as if it were a hair, removing every scrap of twig and grass, worm castings, birds' feathers, pieces of bark. For the rest of the day, the moss looked pristine, and then, slowly, imperceptibly, the world, life, began to encroach on it, and the next morning the process began again. Green and white lichen grew on the gnarled trunk and branches of the plum tree. "Hello, love you, Obito. How you're doing?" "Welcome in. I'm reading Brilliance of the Moon." We're near the end of the book, actually. Kade is just going through the motions of being a prisoner in a gold cage at the moment. Green and white lichen grew on the gnarled trunk and branches of the plum tree, and Kade found herself watching that too every day. Tiny events had the power to startle her. One morning, an ivory marbled, pale pink fungus, like a flower carved from flesh, had erupted in the moss, and when occasionally a bird alighted on top of one of the pine trees and let out a trill of song, her pulse stammered in response. "I'm well, thank you." Running a domain had not fully occupied her restless, hungry mind. Now, she had so little to do, she thought she would die of boredom. She tried to hear the rhythm of the household beyond the walls of her rooms, but few sounds penetrated to the solitary place. Once she heard the cadence of a flute and thought it might be Makoto. She dreaded seeing him, for she was gripped with jealousy at the thought of him free to come and go, free to be with Takeo and fight alongside him. Yet she longed to see him, to have some news, any news. But she had no way of knowing if it was the young monk or not. After the boredom, the worst thing was knowing nothing. Battles might be fought and lost, warlords might rise and fall. All news was kept from her. Her one consolation was that, if Takeo were dead, she felt Fujiwara would tell her, taunting her with it, taking pleasure in his death and her suffering. She knew Fujiwara continued to have his plays performed and wondered sometimes if he had written her own story, as he had once suggested. Mamoru frequently accompanied him on his visits, and was reminded to study Kade's expressions and copy them. She was not permitted to watch the dramas, but she could hear snatches of words and chanting, the sounds of the musicians, the beating of a drum. Occasionally, she would catch a phrase that she was familiar with, and the play it came from would take shape in her head, and she would find herself suddenly moved to tears by the beauty of the words and the poignancy of the emotions. Her own life seemed just as poignant, just as moving. Forced to contemplate the tiny details of her present existence, she began to seek ways to capture her own feelings. Words came to her one by one. Sometimes it took her all day just to select them. She knew little of formal poetry, other than that which she had read in her father's books, but she collected words like golden beads and strung them together in ways that pleased her. She kept them secret inside her own heart. She came to love, above everything, the silence in which the poems formed themselves, like the pillars in the sacred caves of Shirakawa, drip by drip from the limey water. She resented Rieko's chatter, a mixture of malice and self-importance expressed in commonplaces, and Fujiwara's visits, his contrived artificiality, which seemed the complete opposite of the unadorned truth that she saw, or that she sought. Apart from Fujiwara, the only man she saw was Ishida. The physician came every few days, and she enjoyed his visits, though they hardly spoke to each other. When she started looking for words, she stopped taking the calming teas. She wanted to know her feelings, no matter what the anguish. Next to the room that gave onto the garden was a small household shrine with statues of the Enlightened One and the all-merciful Canon. Not even Rieko dared to prevent Kaede from praying, and she knelt there for many hours until she entered a state where prayer and poetry became one, and the everyday world seemed full of holiness and significance. She meditated often on the thoughts that had disturbed her after the Battle of Asagawa and Takeo's persecution of the tribe, and wondered if this state of holiness that she brushed against might bring an answer on how to rule without resorting to violence. Then she chided herself, for she could not see how she would ever rule again, and she had to admit that if she were to wield power, she would seek revenge on all those who had inflicted suffering upon her. Good for her. Honestly. Lamps burned day and night before the shrine, and often Kaede lit incense and let its heavy fragrance fill her nostrils and permeate the air around her. A small bell hung from a frame, and from time to time she would feel the impulse to strike it sharply. The clear note echoed through her rooms, and the maids exchanged glances, careful not to let Rieko see them. They knew something of Keide's history, pitied her, and, increasingly, admired her. One of these girls in particular interested Kaede. She knew from the records that she had copied for Takeo that several members of the tribe were employed in Fujiwara's household, almost certainly unknown to him. 2 men, one of them the estate steward, were paid from the capital. Presumably, they were spies placed there to report back to the court on the exiled nobleman's activities. There were 2 servants in the kitchen who sold snippets of information to whomever would pay them, and another woman, a maid, whom Kaede had tentatively identified as this girl. She had little to go on beyond the fact that there was something indefinable about her that reminded her of Shizuka, and that the girl's hands were similar in shape. Kaede had not missed Shizuka when they had first separated. Her life had been completely taken up with Takeo, but now, in the company of women, she missed her acutely. She missed her acutely. She longed to hear her voice and yearned for her cheerfulness and courage. Above all, she longed for news. The girl's name was Yumi. If anyone knew what was happening in the outside world, it would be one of the tribe. But Kaede was never alone with her, and was afraid to approach her, even indirectly. At first she thought the girl might have been sent to assassinate her, for some motive of revenge, or to punish Takeo, and she watched her without seeming to. Not out of fear, but rather with a sort of curiosity. How it would be done, what it would feel like, and if her first response would be relief or regret. She knew the sentence of death the tribe had passed on to Takeo, made more stringent by the rigours with which he had pursued them in Maruyama. She did not expect any sympathy or support from them. And yet, there was something in the girl's demeanour that suggested she was not hostile to Kaede. As the days grew shorter and cooler, winter garments were brought out and aired, summer ones washed, folded, and put away. For 2 weeks, Kaede wore the in-between season robes and found herself grateful for their extra warmth. Rieko and the maids sewed and embroidered, but Kaede was not allowed to take part. She did not particularly like sewing. She had had to struggle with her left-handedness to become deft at it, but it would have helped to fill the empty days. The colours of the thread appealed to her, and she was enchanted by the way a flower or a bird came alive against the heavy silk fabric. She gathered from Rieko that Lord Fujiwara had ordered all needles, scissors, and knives to be kept from her. Even mirrors had to be brought to her only by Rieko. Kaede thought of the tiny, needle-sized weapon Shizuka had fashioned for her and hidden in her sleeve hem, and the use she had put it to at Inuyama. Did Fujiwara really fear that she might do the same to him? Yes, because as we learned in the last chapter, Fujiwara learned out her secret, that she killed Aida, not Takeo. Rieko never let Kaede out of her sight, except when Fujiwara paid his daily visit. She accompanied her to the bathhouse, and even to the privy, where she held the heavy robes aside, and afterwards washed Kaide's hands for her at the cistern. When Kaide's bleeding began, Fujiwara ceased his visits until she had been purified at the end of the week. Time went past. The plum tree was bare. One morning the moss and the pine needles had a glimmer of frost. The onset of the cold weather brought a wave of sickness. First Kaede caught a cold. Her head ached, and her throat felt as if she had swallowed needles. The fever brought disturbing dreams, but after a few days she recovered, apart from a cough that troubled her at night. Ishida gave her willow bark and valerian. By that time, Rieko had caught the cold. It seemed to have increased in virulence, and the older woman was far more ill than Kaede had been. On the third evening of Rieko's illness, there came a series of small earth tremors. These, and the fever, sent Rieko into a state of panic. She became almost uncontrollable. Alarmed, Kaede sent Yumi to fetch Ishida. Night had fallen by the time he arrived. A silver 3/4 moon hung in an intensely black sky, and the stars were icy points of light. Ishida told Yumi to bring hot water, and he brewed a strong draught and had the sick woman drink it. Gradually, her writhing lessened and her sobs quietened. "She'll sleep for a while," he said. "Yumi may give her another dose if the panic returns." As he spoke, the ground shook again. Through the open door, Kaede saw the moon quiver as the floor beneath her lifted and subsided. The other maid gave a squeal of fright and ran outside. "The ground has been shaking all day," Kaede said. "Is it a warning to us of a severe earthquake?" "Who knows?" Ishida replied. "You had better extinguish the lamps before you go to bed. I'll go home and see what my dog is doing." Your dog? If he's asleep under the veranda, there'll be no big quake, but if he's howling, I'll start getting worried. Ishida chuckled, and Kade realized it had been a long time since she'd seen him in such a good mood. He was a quiet, self-contained, conscientious man, guided by his duty to Fujiwara and his calling as a doctor. But she felt something had happened to him that night to penetrate his calm exterior. He left them, and Yumi followed Kade into the sleeping room to help her undress. The doctor seems cheerful tonight, Kade remarked. It was so pleasant not to have Rieko listening to her every word that she felt like talking just for the sake of it. The robe slid from her shoulders, and as Yumi lifted her hair to free it, Kade felt her breath against her ear and heard her whisper. That's because Muto Shizuka. I'll do that a bit louder. That's because Muto Shizuka came to see him. Kade felt the blood drain from her head. The room seemed to whirl around her, not from an earth tremor, but from her own weakness. Yumi held her to support her and lowered her onto the sleeping mat. She brought out the night robe and helped Kade put it on. My lady must not get cold and fall sick again, she murmured, taking up the comb to attend to Kade's hair. What is the news? Kade said quietly. The Muto have made a truce with Lord Otori. The Muto master is with him now. Just hearing his name spoken made Kade's heart bound so strongly she thought she would vomit. Where is he? At the coast, at Shuho. He surrendered to Lord Arai. She could not imagine what had been happening to him. Will he be safe? He and Arai formed an alliance. They will attack Hagi together. Another battle, Kade murmured. A storm of emotion raced through her, making her eyes grow hot. And my sisters? They are well. A marriage has been arranged for Lady Ai to Lord Akita's nephew. Please don't cry, lady. No one must ever find out that you know these things. My life depends on it. Shizuka swore to me that you would be able to conceal your feelings. Kade fought to keep the tears from falling. My younger sister? Arai wanted to betroth her to Lord Otori, but he says he will not consider marriage until he has taken Hagi. It was as if a hidden needle had slipped into her heart. It had not occurred to her, but of course Takeo would marry again. His marriage to her had been annulled. He would be expected to take another wife. Hana was an obvious choice, sealing the alliance with Fujiwara, giving Arai another link to the Maruyama and Shirakawa domains. Hana is only a child, she said dully as the comb raked through her hair. Had Takeo forgotten her already? Would he happily accept her sister, who looked so much like her? The jealousy that had racked her when she'd imagined Makoto with him now returned 1,000-fold. Her isolation, her imprisonment, struck her with renewed force. The day I hear he is married, I will die, if I have to bite my own tongue, she swore silently. You may be sure Lord Otori has his own plans, Yumi whispered. After all, he was riding to rescue you when Arai intercepted him and drove him back to the coast. Only the typhoon prevented his escape then. He was coming to rescue me? Kaede said. The jealousy abated a little, washed away by gratitude and a faint glimmer of hope. As soon as he heard of your abduction, he set out with over 1,000 men. Kaede could feel Yumi trembling. He sent Shizuka to tell you he loves you and will never give you up. Be patient. He will come for you. A sound came from the next room, a sort of feverish cry. Both women went still. Come with me to the privy, Kaede said, as calmly as if she had said no other words all evening beyond hold my robe and comb my hair. She was all too aware of the risks Yumi took by bringing her this message and feared for her safety. Yumi took a warm cloak and wrapped it around her. They stepped silently onto the veranda. It was colder than ever. It will freeze tonight, the girl remarked. Shall I order more charcoal for the braziers? Kaede listened. The night was still. There was no wind and no dog howling. Yes, let's try to stay warm. At the entrance to the privy, she slipped the fur robe from her shoulders and gave it to Yumi to hold. Squatting in the dark recess where no one could see her, she let herself feel joy. The words were beating in her brain, the words the goddess herself had spoken to her. Be patient. He will come for you. The following day, Rieko was a little better. She rose and dressed at her usual time, even though Kaede begged her to rest longer. The autumn wind blew more coldly from the mountain, but Kaede felt a warmth she had not known since her capture. She tried not to think about Takeo, but Yumi's whispered message had brought his image intensely to the forefront of her mind. The words he had sent to her beat so loudly inside her head, she was sure someone would hear them. She was terrified of giving herself away. She did not speak to Yumi, or even look at her, but she was aware of a new feeling between them, a kind of complicity. Surely Rieko, with her cormorant eyes, could not miss it. Sickness made Rieko short-tempered and more malicious than ever. She found fault with everything, complained about the food, sent for 3 different types of tea, found them all musty, slapped Yumi for not bringing hot water fast enough, and reduced the second maid, Kumiko, to tears when she expressed her fear of earthquakes. Kumiko was normally light-hearted and cheerful, and Rieko allowed her a certain leeway that the other maids would never have enjoyed. But this morning she sneered at her, laughing in contempt at the girl's fears, ignoring the fact that she herself shared them. Kaede retreated from the unpleasant atmosphere and went to sit in her favourite place, looking out over the tiny garden. The sun was just barely shining into the room, but in a few weeks it would no longer clear the outer walls. Winter would be gloomy in these rooms, but surely he would come for her before winter? She could not see the mountains, but she imagined them soaring into the blue autumn sky. They would be snow-capped by now. A bird settled suddenly on the pine tree, chirped loudly, and then flew away again over the roof, a flash of green and white in its wings. It reminded her of the bird Takeo had painted so long ago. Could it be a message for her? A message that she would soon be free? The women's voices rose behind her. Kumiko was crying. "I can't help it. If the house starts to shake, I have to run outside. I can't bear it." "So that's what you did last night. You left her ladyship on her own while I was asleep?" "Yumi was with her all the time," Kumiko answered, weeping. "Lord Fujiwara's orders were that there must always be two of us with her." The sound of another slap echoed through the room. Kade thought of the bird's flight, the woman's tears. Her own eyes grew hot. She heard footsteps and knew Rieko stood behind her, but she did not turn her head. "So, Lady Fujiwara was alone with Yumi last night. I heard you whispering. What were you talking about?" "We whispered only so as not to disturb you," Kade replied. "We spoke of nothing. The autumn wind, the brilliance of the moon, perhaps. I asked her to comb my hair, accompany me to the privy." Rieko knelt beside her and tried to look into her face. Her heavy scent made Kade cough. "Don't bother me," Kade said, turning away. "We are both unwell. Let us try to spend a peaceful day." "How ungrateful you are," Rieko said in a voice as tiny as a mosquito's. "And what a fool. Lord Fujiwara has done everything for you, and you still dream of deceiving him." "You must be feverish," Kade said. "You are imagining things. How could I deceive Lord Fujiwara in any way? I am completely his prisoner." "His wife," Rieko corrected her. "Even to use such a word as prisoner shows how you still rebel against your husband." Kade said nothing, just gazed at the pine needles etched against the sky. She was afraid of what she might reveal to Rieko. Yumi's message had brought her hope, but the reverse side of hope was fear. For Yumi, for Shizuka, for herself. "You seem changed in some way," Rieko muttered. "You think I can't read you?" "It's true I feel a little warm," Kade said. "I believe the fever has returned." "Are they at Hagi yet?" she thought. "Is he fighting now? May he be protected. May he live." "I am going to pray for a little while," she told Rieko, and went to kneel before the shrine. Kumiko brought the coals and Kade lit incense. The heavy smell drifted through the rooms, bringing an uneasy peace to the women within. A few days later, Yumi went to fetch the food for the midday meal and did not return. Another maid came in her place, an older woman. She and Kumiko served the meal in silence. Kumiko's eyes were red and she sniffed miserably. When Kaede tried to find out what was wrong, Rieko snapped. She has caught the cold, that's all. Where is Yumi? Kaede asked. You are interested in her? That proves my suspicions were right. What suspicions? Kaede said. What can you mean? I have no feelings about her one way or the other. I simply wondered where she was. You won't be seeing her again, Rieko said coldly. Kumiko made a strangled sound, as if she were muffling a sob. Kaede felt very cold, and yet her skin was burning. She felt as if the walls were closing in on her. By evening, her head was aching fiercely. She asked Rieko if she would send for Ishida. When he came, she was appalled at his appearance. A few days earlier, he had been merry. Now his face was gaunt and drawn, his eyes like shriveled coals, his skin grey. His manner was as calm as ever, and he spoke to her with great kindness. Hello, Kid Monster, how are you doing? Welcome in. But it was obvious something terrible had happened, and Rieko knew about it. Kaede was sure of that from her pursed lips and sharp eyes. Not to be able to question the doctor was torture. Not to know what was happening in the household around her, or in the world outside, would surely drive her mad. Ishida gave her tea brewed from willow bark, and bade her good night with unusual intensity. She was sure she would never see him again. Despite the sedative, she spent a restless night. In the morning, she questioned Rieko again about Yumi's disappearance and Ishida's distress. When she received no other answer than veiled accusations, she decided she would appeal to Fujiwara himself. It was nearly a week since she had seen him. He had stayed away during their sickness. She could not endure the inexplicably threatening atmosphere any longer. Will you tell Lord Fujiwara I would like to see him? She asked Rieko when she had finished dressing. The woman went herself and returned to say, His lordship is delighted that his wife desires his company. He has arranged a special entertainment for this evening. He will see you then. I would like to speak to him alone, Kaede said. Rieko shrugged. There are no special guests at present. Only Mamoru will be with him. You had better bathe, and I suppose we must wash your hair, so it can be dried in the sun. When her hair was at last dry, Rieko insisted on oiling it heavily before she dressed. Kaede put on the quilted winter robes, grateful for their warmth, for her wet hair had made her very cold, and though the day was sunny, the air was chilly. She ate a little soup at midday. Hello, Pixie. She ate a little soup at midday, but her stomach and throat seemed to have closed against food. You are very white, Rieko said. Lord Fujiwara admires that in a woman. The undertone in her words made Kaede tremble. Something terrible was about to happen, was already happening. Everyone knew about it but her, and they would reveal it to her when it pleased them. Her pulse quickened, and she felt its rapid thump in her neck, in her belly. From outside came a dull hammering sound that seemed to echo her own heart. She went to kneel at the shrine, but even that failed to calm her. At the end of the afternoon, Mamoru came and led her to the pavilion, where she had watched the first snow fall with Fujiwara at the beginning of the year. Although it was not yet dark, lanterns were already lit in the bare-branched trees, and braziers burned on the veranda. She glanced at the young man, trying to learn something from his demeanour. He was as white as she was, and she thought she detected pity in his eyes. Her alarm deepened. It had been so long since she had seen any landscape that the scene before her, the gardens and the mountains beyond, seemed unutterably beautiful. The last rays of the sun turned the snow-capped peaks to pink and gold, and the sky was a translucent colour between blue and silver. She gazed at it, drinking it in as if it were the last sight she would see on earth. Mamoru wrapped a bearskin around her and murmured, "Lord Fujiwara will be with you soon." Directly in front of the veranda was an area of tiny white stones, raked into a swirling pattern. 2 posts had been newly erected in the centre. Kaede frowned at them. They broke the pattern of the stones in a harsh, almost threatening way. She heard the padding of feet, the rustling of robes. "His lordship is approaching," Rieko said behind her, and they both bowed to the ground. Fujiwara's particular fragrance wafted over Kaede as he sat next to her. He did not speak for a long time, and when he finally told her she might sit up, she thought she heard anger in his voice. Her heart quailed. She tried to call on her courage, but she had none. She was deathly afraid. "I am glad to see you recovered," he said with icy politeness. Her mouth was so dry she could hardly speak. "It is thanks to your lordship's care," she whispered. "Rieko said you wished to speak to me." "I always desire your lordship's company," she began, but faltered when his mouth twisted mockingly. "Let me not be afraid," she prayed. "If he sees I am afraid, he will know he has broken me. He is, after all, only a man. He did not want me to have even a needle. He knows what I can do. He knows I killed Aida." She drew a deep breath. "I feel there are things going on that I do not understand. Have I offended your lordship? Please tell me what I have done wrong." "There are things going on that I do not understand," he replied. "Almost a conspiracy, I would say. And in my own household. I cannot believe my wife would stoop to such infamy, but Rieko told me of her suspicions, and the maid confirmed them before she died." "What suspicions?" Kaede asked, showing no emotion. "That someone brought a message to you from Otori." "Rieko is lying," Kaede said, but her voice did not obey her. "I don't think so. Your former companion, Muto Shizuka, was seen in this district. I was surprised. If she wanted to see you, she should have approached me. Then I remembered that Arai had used her as a spy. maid confirmed that Autori sent her. That was shocking enough, but imagine my astonishment when she was discovered in Ishida's rooms. I was devastated. Ishida, my most trusted servant, almost my friend. How dangerous not to be able to trust one's physician. It would be so easy for him to poison me. He is completely trustworthy, Keide said. He is devoted to you. Even if it were true that Shizuka brought a message to me from Lord Autori, it has nothing to do with Dr. Ishida. He looked at her as though she had not grasped what he was saying. They were sleeping together, he said. My physician has been having an affair with a woman known to be a spy. Keide did not reply. She had not known of their relationship. She had been too wrapped up in her own passion to notice it. Now it seemed quite obvious. She recalled all the signs. How often Shizuka had gone to Ishida's rooms to collect medicine or tea, and now Takeo had sent Shizuka with a message for her. Shizuka and Ishida had risked seeing each other, and they were to be punished for it. The sun had set behind the mountains, but it was not yet dark. Twilight lay over the garden, barely dispelled by the light of the lanterns. A crow flew overhead to its roost, cawing bitterly. I am very fond of Ishida, Fujiwara said, and I know you had become attached to your woman. It's a tragedy, but we must try to comfort each other in our grief. He clapped his hands. Bring wine, Mamoru, and I think we will begin our entertainment. He leaned towards Keide. We don't have to hurry. We have all night. She still had not grasped his meaning. She glanced at his face, saw the cruel set of his mouth and the skin's pallor, the tiny muscle in his jaw that gave him away. His eyes turned to her, and she looked away to the posts. A sudden faintness came over her. The lanterns and the white stones began to swirl around her. She took a deep breath to steady herself. Don't do this, she whispered. It is not worthy of you. In the distance, a dog was howling. It howled and howled without ceasing. It is Ishida's dog, Keide thought, and could almost believe it was her own heart, for it expressed utterly her horror and despair. Disobedience and disloyalty to me must be punished, he said, and in a way that will discourage others. If they must die, make it swift, she said. I will do anything you ask of me in return. But you already should do that, he said, almost puzzled. What else can you offer that a wife should not already do? Be merciful, she begged. I do not have a merciful nature, he replied. You have run out of bargaining power, my dear wife. You thought you could use me for your own purposes. Now I will use you for mine. Keide heard footsteps on the gravel. She looked towards the sound as though the power of her gaze could reach Shizuka and save her. Guards walked slowly to the posts. They were armed with swords, and they carried other instruments whose appearance brought a metallic taste of fear to her mouth. Most of the men were sombre-faced, but one of them was grinning with nervous excitement. Between them, Ishida and Shizuka were two small figures, weak human bodies with an immense capacity for pain. Neither of them made a sound as they were tied to the posts, but Shizuka raised her head and looked at Keide. "This cannot happen. They will take poison," Keide told herself. Fujiwara said, "I don't think we left your woman with any way of saving herself, but it will be interesting to see." Keide had no idea what Fujiwara intended to do, what torture and cruel death he had devised, but she had heard enough stories at Noguchi Castle to be able to imagine the worst. She realized she was on the edge of losing control. She half rose, in itself unthinkable in Fujiwara's presence, and tried to plead with him, but even as the words came stumbling from her, there was a disturbance at the front gate. Guards called out briefly, and two men came into the garden. One was Morita, the man who had come to escort her, and had then ambushed and killed her men. He carried his sword in his left hand. His right hand was still scarred from when she had cut it. She thought she did not know the other, but there was something familiar about him. Both knelt before Fujiwara, and Morita spoke. "Lord Fujiwara, forgive me for disturbing you, but this man says he brings an urgent message from Lord Arai." Keide had sunk to the floor again, grateful for this brief respite. She turned her eyes to the other man, noticed his big hands and long arms, and realized with a shock that it was Kondo. He had dissembled his features, but when he spoke, his voice was changed too. But surely Morita and Fujiwara would know him. "Lord Fujiwara, Lord Arai sends his greetings to you. Everything is going according to plan." "Is Otori dead?" the nobleman asked, glancing briefly at Keide. "Not yet," the man replied, "but in the meantime, Lord Arai asks that you return Muto Shizuka to him. He has a particular personal interest in her and wishes to keep her alive." For a moment, Keide felt hope flood into her heart. Fujiwara would not dare harm Shizuka if Arai wanted her back. "What a strange request," Fujiwara said, "and a strange messenger." He ordered Morita, Disarm him. Disarm him. I don't trust him." The dog howled with a new intensity of fear. It seemed to Keide that there was a moment of stillness, and then, as she tried to call out, as Morita stepped towards Kondo, and Kondo drew his sword, the whole world groaned and lifted. The veranda rose through the air. The trees flew and then crashed. The house behind her shook and was torn apart. More dogs were barking now, frantically. The caged birds shrieked in alarm. The air was full of dust. From the fallen buildings came the screams of women and the instant crackling of fire. The veranda landed heavily with a thud that shook Keide's body. The floor was slanting back towards the house, the roof splintering above her. Her eyes were full of fragments of dust and straw. For a moment she thought she was trapped. Then she saw she could climb out and began to scrabble up the strange slope the veranda had assumed. Over its edge, she saw as if in a dream Shizuka slip her hands from the bindings, kick one of the guards between the legs, take his sword from him, and slash him in the neck. Kondo had already dealt Marita a blow that had almost cut him in half. Fujiwara was lying behind Keide, partly covered by the fallen roof. His body was twisted, and he did not seem to be able to get up, but he reached out to her and took her ankle in his hand, the first time he had ever touched her. His fingers were cold and his grip inescapable. The dust was making him cough. His clothes were filthy, and he smelled of sweat and urine beneath the customary fragrance. Yet, when he spoke, his voice was as calm as ever. "If we are to die, let us die together," he said. Behind him, she could hear the flames crackling and snarling like a living creature. The smoke thickened, stinging her eyes and masking all the other smells. She pulled and kicked against his clutching fingers. "I just wanted to possess you," he said. "You were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I wanted you to be mine and no one else's. I wanted to intensify your love for Takeo by denying it so I could share in the tragedy of your suffering." Let go of me," she screamed. She could feel the heat of the fire now. "Shizuka, Kondo, help me." Shizuka was fully occupied with the other guards, fighting like a man. Ishida's hands were still tied to the post. Kondo killed one of the guards from behind, turned his head at Keide's voice, and then strode towards the burning house. He leapt onto the edge of the veranda. "Lady Otori," he said, "I'll free you. Run to the garden, to the pools. Shizuka will look after you." He climbed down and deliberately cut through Fujiwara's wrist. The nobleman gave one harsh scream of pain and outrage. His hand fell from Keide's ankle. Kondo pushed her upwards and over the edge. "Take my sword. I know you can defend yourself." He thrust it into her hands and went on swiftly. "I swore allegiance to you. I meant it. I would never let anyone hurt you while I live. But it was a crime for someone like me to kill your father. It's even more of a crime to attack a nobleman and kill him. I'm ready to pay for it." He gave her a look, stripped of all irony, and smiled. "Run," he said. "Run! Your husband will come for you." She stepped backwards. She saw Fujiwara try to rise, the blood pouring from the stump of his arm. Kondo wound his long arms round the nobleman and held him firmly. The flames burst through the fragile walls and received them both, wrapping them, concealing them. The heat and the screams engulfed her. "He is burning. All his treasures are burning," she thought wildly. She thought she heard Kumiko cry out from the inferno and wanted to do something to save her. But as she started towards the house, Shizuka pulled her back. "You're on fire!" Keide dropped the sword and put her hands uselessly to her head as the flames erupted on her oiled hair. End of chapter 10. I didn't like that. Oh no, that's not good. Oiled hair. That's such a good chapter, but the ending. Damn it. Chapter 11. The sun set, and the moon rose over the still surface of the sea, making a silver road for our fleet to follow. It was so bright, I could see clearly the range of mountains behind the coast we were leaving. The tide rippled under the hulls, and the sails flapped in the offshore breeze. The oars splashed in a steady rhythm. We came to Oshima in the early hours of the morning. A white mist rose from the surface of the sea, and Fumio told me it would be the same for the next few nights as the air grew colder. It was perfect for our purpose. We spent the day on the island, reprovisioning from the pirates' stores and taking on board more of Terada's men, who were armed with swords, knives, and a variety of other weapons, most of which I'd never seen before. At the end of the afternoon, we went to the shrine and made offerings to Ebisu and Hachiman. I know Hachiman. Hachiman's the god of war. I don't know who Ebisu is. Praying for calm seas and the defeat of our enemies. The priests gave us conch shells for each ship, and auspicious fortunes that encouraged the men, though Fumio took it all with a certain skepticism, patting his firearm and muttering, "This is more auspicious in my opinion," while I was happy enough to pray to any god, knowing that they were simply different faces, created by men, of one indivisible truth. The moon, one night off full, was rising over the mountains as we set sail for Hagi. This time, Kenji, Taku, and I went with Ryoma in his smaller, swifter boat. I left Zenko in Fumio's care, having told him of the boy's parentage, and impressing on him the importance of keeping Arai's son alive. Just before dawn, the mist began to foam above the water, shrouding us as we approached the sleeping city. From across the bay, I could hear the first roosters crowing and the early bells from Tokoji and Daishoin. My plan was to go straight to the castle. I had no desire to destroy my city or see the Otori clan wash blood with blood. I thought that if we could kill or capture the Otori lords right away, there was every chance the clan would side with me rather than tear itself apart. This was also the opinion of the Otori warriors who had already joined me. Many of them had begged to be allowed to accompany me and take part in the vengeance firsthand. They all had experiences of ill treatment, insults, and breaches of faith. Sounds like my old boss. But my aim was to penetrate the castle silently and secretly. I would take only Kenji and Taku. I placed all the other men under Terada's command. The old pirate had been alight with excitement and the anticipation of settling long-standing scores. I'd given him some instructions, The boats were to remain offshore until daybreak. Then they were to sound the conch shells and advance through the mist. The rest was up to him. I hoped to be able to convince the city to surrender. If not, we would fight through the streets to the bridge and open it for Arai's army. The castle was built on a promontory between the river and the sea. I knew from my visit on the day of my adoption that the residence was on the seaward side, where a huge wall, considered to be invulnerable, rose from the water around it. Kenji and Taku had their grapples and other tribe weapons. I was armed with throwing knives, a short sword, and jato. The moon set, and the mist grew thicker. The boat drifted silently towards the shore and nudged the sea wall with the faintest of sounds. One by one we climbed onto the wall and went invisible. I heard footsteps above our heads, and a voice called out, "Who's there? Name yourself." Ryoma answered in the dialect of a Hagi fisherman. "Only me. Got a bit lost in this dirty mist. Kid master." "Got a bit pissed, you mean?" a second man called back. "Get out of here. If we can see you when the fog clears, we'll put an arrow in you." The sound of the oar faded away. I hissed at the other two. I couldn't see either of them, and we began to climb. It was a slow process. The wall, washed twice a day by the tide, was coated in seaweed and slippery. But inch by inch we crawled up it and eventually came to its top. One last autumn cricket was chirping, and it fell suddenly silent. Kenji chirped in its place. Smart. I could hear the guards talking at the far corner of the bailey. A lamp and a brazier burned beside them. Beyond them lay the residence where the Otori lords, their retainers, and families would be sleeping. I could only hear two voices, which surprised me. I'd thought there would be more, but from their conversation I gathered that all available men had been posted on the bridge and along the river in anticipation of Arai's attack. "Wish he'd get it over with," one of them grumbled. "It's this waiting I can't stand." "He must know how little food there is in the town," the other replied. "Probably thinks he can starve us out." "I suppose it's better to have him out there than in here." "Enjoy it while you can. If the town falls to Arai, it'll be a bloodbath. Even Takeo ran away into the typhoon rather than face Arai." I felt alongside me for Taku, found his shape and pulled his head close to me. "Go inside the wall," I mouthed in his ear. "Distract them while we take them from behind." I felt him nod and heard the tiny sound as he moved away. Kenji and I followed him over the wall. In the glow from the brazier, I suddenly caught sight of a small shadow. It flitted across the ground and then divided in two, silent and ghostly. "What was that?" one of the guards exclaimed. They were both on their feet and staring towards Taku's two images. It was easy for us. We took one each, soundlessly. The guards had just made tea, so we drank it while we waited for daybreak. The sky paled gradually. There was no separation between it and the water. It was all one shimmering surface. When the conch shells began to sound, the hair stood up on the back of my neck. Dogs howled in response from the shore. I heard the household within erupt into activity. The padding of feet, not yet frantic. Cries of surprise, not yet alarm. The shutters were thrown open, and the doors slid apart. A group of guards rushed out, followed by Shoichi and Masahiro, still in night attire, but with their swords in their hands. They stopped dead as I walked towards them, Chateau unsheathed in my hand, the mist wreathing around me. Behind me the first ships were appearing. The conch shells sang again over the water, and the sound echoed back from the mountains around the bay. Masahiro took a step back. "Shigeru?" he gasped. His older brother went white. They saw the man they had tried to murder. They saw the Otori sword in his hand, and they were terrified. I said, in a loud voice, "I am Otori Takeo, grandson of Shigemori, nephew and adopted son of Shigeru. I hold you responsible for the death of the rightful heir to the Otori clan. You sent Shintaro to assassinate him, and when that failed, you conspired with Aida Sadamu to murder him. Aida has already paid with his life, and now you will." I was aware that Kenji stood behind me, sword drawn, and hoped Taku was still invisible. I did not take my eyes off the men in front of me. Shoichi tried to regain his composure. "Your adoption was illegal. You have no claim to Otori blood, nor to the sword you carry. We do not recognize you." He called to the retainers, "Cut them down." Chateau seemed to quiver in my hands as it came alive. I was prepared to meet the attack, but no one moved. I saw Shoichi's face change as he realized he was going to have to fight me himself. "I have no wish to split the clan," I said. "My only desire is for your heads." I thought I'd given them enough warning. I could feel Chateau thirsting for blood. It was as though Shigeru's spirit had taken me over and would have his revenge. Shoichi was the closer, and I knew he was the better swordsman. I would get rid of him first. They had both been good fighters, but they were now old men in their late 40s, and they wore no armor. Jesus, old men in late 40s, okay. I was at the height of speed and fitness, flesh and bone, planed by hardship and war. I killed Shoichi with a blow to the neck that cut him diagonally. Masahiro swung at me from behind, but Kenji parried the stroke, and as I spun to meet my other opponent, I saw fear distort his face. I pushed him back towards the wall. He avoided each stroke, weaving and parrying, but his heart was not in it. He made one last appeal to his men, but still not one of them moved. The gladiator ending. The first ships were not far offshore. Masahiro looked behind him, looked back, and saw Chateau descend on him. He made a frantic ducking movement and fell over the wall. Furious that he had escaped me, I was about to jump after him, when his son, Yoshitomi, my old enemy from the fighting hall, came running from the residence, followed by a handful of his brothers and cousins. None of them was more than 20. "I'll fight you, sorcerer," Yoshitomi cried. "Let's see if you can fight like a warrior." I had gone into an almost supernatural state, and Jato was enraged by now, and had tasted blood. It moved faster than the eye could follow. Whenever I seemed to be outnumbered, Kenji was at my side. I was sorry such young men had to die, but glad that they too paid for the treachery of their fathers. When I was able to turn my attention back to Masahiro, I saw he had surfaced near a small boat at the front of the line of ships. It was Ryoma's. Seizing his father by his hair, the young man pulled him upwards and cut his throat with one of the knives fishermen use to gut fish. Whatever Masahiro's crimes, this was a far more terrible death than any I could have devised for him. To be killed by his own son while trying to escape in fear. I turned to face the crowd of retainers. "I have a huge force of men on the ships out there, and Lord Arai is in alliance with me. I have no quarrel with any of you. You may take your own lives, you may serve me, or you may fight me one-on-one now. I have fulfilled my duty to Lord Shigeru and done what he commanded." I could still feel his spirit inhabiting me. One of the older men stepped forward. I remembered his face, but his name escaped me. "I am Endo, Chikara. Many of us have sons and nephews who have already joined you. We have no desire to fight our own children. You have done what was your duty, and your right, in a fair and honourable way. For the sake of the clan, I am prepared to serve you, Lord Otori." With that, he knelt, and one by one, the others followed. Kenji and I went through the residence and placed guards on the women and children. I hoped the women would take their own lives honourably. I would decide what to do with the children later. We checked all the secret places and flushed out several spies hidden there. Some were obviously Kikuta, but neither in the residence nor the castle was there any sign of Kotaro, who Kenji had been told was in Hagi. Endo came with me to the castle. The captain of the guard there was equally relieved to be able to surrender to me. His name was Miyoshi Satoru. He was Kahei and Gemba's father. Once the castle was secured, the boats came to shore, and the men disembarked to move through the town street by street. Taking the castle, which I had thought would be the hardest part of my plan, turned out to be the easiest. Despite its surrender and my best efforts, the town did not give in altogether peacefully. The streets... Pardon. One moment. The streets were in chaos. People tried to flee, but there was nowhere to go. Terada and his men had scores of their own to settle, and there were pockets of stubborn resistance that we had to overcome in fierce hand-to-hand fighting. Finally, we came to the banks of the Western River, not far from the stone bridge. Judging by the sun, It must have been late afternoon. The mist had lifted long ago, but smoke from burning houses hung above the river. On the opposite bank, the last of the maple leaves were brilliant red, and willows along the water's edge were yellow. The leaves were falling, drifting in the eddies. Late chrysanthemums bloomed in the gardens. In the distance I could see the fish weir and the tiled walls along the bank. My house is there, I thought. I will sleep there tonight. But the river was full of men swimming in small boats loaded to the gunwales, while a long stream of soldiers pressed towards the bridge. Kenji and Taku were still alongside me, Taku silenced by what he had seen of war. We stared at the sight, the remnants of the Otori army in defeat. I was filled with pity for them and anger at their lords who had so misled and betrayed them, leaving them to fight this desperate rearguard action, while they slept comfortably in Hagi Castle. I had been separated from Fumio, but now I saw him at the bridge with a handful of his men. They seemed to be arguing with a group of Otori captains. We went over to them. Zenko was with Fumio, and he smiled briefly at his brother. They stood close to each other, but did not say anything. "This is Lord Otori Takeo," Fumio told the men when I approached. "The castle has surrendered to him. He'll tell you." He turned to me. "They want to destroy the bridge and prepare for siege. They don't believe in the alliance with Arai. They've been fighting him off for the last week. He's right behind them. They say their only hope is to get the bridge down immediately." I removed my helmet so they could see my face. They immediately dropped to their knees. "Arai has sworn to support me," I said. "The alliance is genuine. Once he knows the town has surrendered, he will cease the attack." "Let's break the bridge down anyway," their leader said. I thought of the ghost of the stonemason entombed alive in his creation, and of the inscription that Shigeru had read aloud to me. "The Otori clan welcome the just and the loyal. Let the unjust and the disloyal beware." I did not want to destroy such a precious thing, and anyway, I could not see how they would dismantle it in time. "No, let it stand," I replied. "I will answer for Lord Arai's faithfulness. Tell your men they have nothing to fear if they surrender to me and accept me as their lord." Endo and Miyoshi came up on horseback, and I sent them to carry the message to the Otori soldiers. Little by little, the confusion settled. We cleared the bridge, and Endo rode to the other side to organize a more orderly return to the town. Many men were reassured enough to settle down where they were and rest, while others decided they might as well go home and set off for their farms and houses. Miyoshi said, "You should be on horseback, Lord Takeo," and gave me his horse, a good-looking black that reminded me of Aoi. I mounted, rode across the bridge to speak to the men there, causing them to break out into cheers, and then rode back with Endo. When the cheers died away, I could hear the distant sound of Arai's army approaching, the tramping of horses and men. They came down the valley, a stream of ants in the distance, the Kumamoto and Sesshu banners unfurled. As they came closer, I recognized Arai at their head. Chestnut horse, stag antlered helmet, red-laced armour. I leaned down to Kenji. I should go and meet him. Kenji frowned as he peered across the river. Something feels wrong, he said quietly. What? I don't know. Be on your guard and don't cross the bridge. As I urged the black forward slightly, Endo said, I am senior retainer of the Otori clan. Let me take the news of our surrender to you, to Lord Arai. Very well, I said. Tell him to encamp his army on that side of the river and bring him into town. Then we can enforce peace with no further bloodshed on either side. Endo rode forward onto the bridge, and Arai halted and waited on the other side. Endo was almost halfway across when Arai held up his hand with the black war fan in it. There was a moment of silence. Zenko cried at my side, They are arming their bows! The war fan dropped. Though it was happening right in front of my eyes, I could not believe it. For several moments I stared incredulous as the arrows began to fall. Endo went down at once, and the men on the bank, unarmed and unprepared, fell like deer to the hunter. There, Kenji said, drawing his sword. That's what's wrong. Once before I had been so betrayed, but that had been by Kenji himself and the tribe. This betrayal was by a warrior to whom I had sworn allegiance. Had I killed Joanne for this? Fury and outrage turned my vision red. I had taken the impregnable castle, kept the bridge whole, pacified the men. I had handed Hagi, my town, to Arai like a ripe persimmon, and with it the 3 countries. Dogs were howling in the distance. They sounded like my own soul. Arai rode onto the bridge and came to a halt in the centre. He saw me and lifted off his helmet. It was a derisive gesture. He was so sure of his own strength, of victory. Thank you, Otori, he called. What a good work you did. Will you surrender now, or shall we fight it out? You may rule over the 3 countries, I shouted back, but your falsehood will be remembered long after your death. I knew I was about to fight my last battle, and it was, as I had known it must be, with Arai. I just had not realized it would come so quickly. There will be no one left to record it, he sneered in reply, because I intend now to wipe out the Otori once and for all. I leaned down and seized Zenko, pulling him up onto the horse in front of me. I took my short sword and held it to his neck. I have both your sons here. Will you condemn them to death? I swear to you, I will kill Zenko now and Taku after him before you can reach me. Call off your attack. His face changed a little and paled. Taku stood motionless next to Kenji. Zenko did not move either. Both boys stared at the father they had not seen for years. Then Arai's features hardened and he laughed. I know you, Takeo. I know your weakness. You were not raised as a warrior. Let's see if you can bring yourself to kill a child. I should have acted immediately and ruthlessly, but I did not. I hesitated. Arai laughed again. Let him go, he called. Zenko, come here to me. Fumio called in a low, clear voice, "Takeo, shall I shoot him?" I can't remember replying. I can't remember letting go of Zenko. I heard the muffled report from the firearm and saw Arai recoil in the saddle as the ball hit him, piercing his armor above the heart. There was a cry of rage and horror from the men around him, and a scuffle as his horse reared. Zenko screamed, but these sounds were as nothing to the roar that followed them, as the world beneath my horse's feet tore itself apart. The maples on the far shore rose almost gracefully and began to march down the hillside. They gathered up Arai's army as they went, wrapping them in stones and soil and rolling them into the river. My horse, backed in terror, reared and fled from the bridge, throwing me sideways onto the road. As I got to my feet, winded, the bridge groaned with a human voice. It cried out in its efforts to hold itself together, and then flew apart, taking everyone on it down into the river. Then the river itself went mad. From the confluence upstream came a yellow-brown flood of water. It drained away from the bank on the town side, gathering up boats and living beings impartially, and raced over the opposite bank, where it swept away the remnants of two armies, breaking the boats like eating sticks, drowning men and horses, and carrying their corpses out to sea. The ground shook fiercely again, and from behind me I heard the crash of collapsing houses. I felt as if I'd been stunned. Everything around me was hazy with dust and muffled, so I could no longer hear distinct sounds. I was aware of Kenji beside me and Taku kneeling by his brother, who had also fallen when the horse reared. I saw Fumio coming towards me through the haze, the firearm still in his hand. I was shaking from some mixture of emotions close to elation, a recognition of how puny we humans are when confronted with the great forces of nature, combined with gratitude to heaven, to the gods I'd thought I did not believe in, who once again had spared my life. My last battle had begun and ended in a moment. There was no further thought of fighting. Our only concern now was to save the town from fire. Much of the district around the castle burned to the ground. The castle itself was destroyed in one of the aftershocks, killing the remaining women and children who were being held there. I was relieved, for I knew I could not let them live, but I shrank from ordering their deaths. Ryoma also died then, his boat sunk by falling masonry. When his body washed up days later, I had him buried with the Otori lords at Daishoin, their name on his gravestone. In the next few days, I hardly slept or ate. With Miyoshi and Kenji's help, I organized the survivors to clear the rubble, bury the dead, and care for the wounded. Through the long, sorrowful days of work and cooperation and grief, the rifts in the clan began to heal. The earthquake was generally held to be heaven's punishment on Arai for his treachery. Heaven clearly favored me. I was Shigeru's adopted son and nephew by blood. I had his sword, I resembled him, and I had avenged his death. The clan accepted me unreservedly as his true heir. I did not know what the situation was in the rest of the land. The earthquakes had shattered much of the 3 countries, and we heard nothing from the other cities. All I was aware of was the enormity of the task that faced me in restoring peace and preventing famine in the coming winter. I did not sleep at Shigeru's house the night of the earthquake, nor for many days following. I could not bear to go near it in case it had been destroyed. I camped with Miyoshi in what remained of his residence. But about 4 days after the earthquake, Kenji came to me one evening after I had eaten and told me there was someone to see me. He was grinning, and for a moment I imagined it might be Shizuka with a message from Keide. Instead it was the maids from Shigeru's house, Chiyo and Haruka. They looked exhausted and frail, and when they saw me, I was afraid Chiyo would die from emotion. They both knelt at my feet, but I made them get up, and I embraced Chiyo as tears streamed down her face. None of us could speak. Finally, Chiyo said, "Come home, Lord Takeo. The house is waiting for you." "It's still standing?" "The garden is ruined. The river swept through it, but the house is not badly damaged. We'll get it ready for you tomorrow." I will come tomorrow evening," I promised. "You will come too, sir?" she said to Kenji. "Almost like old times," he replied, smiling, though we all knew it could never be that. The following day, Kenji and I took Taku and some guards and walked down the familiar street. I did not take Zenko. The circumstances surrounding Arai's death had left his older son deeply disturbed. I was concerned for him, seeing his confusion and grief, but did not have time to deal with it. I suspected that he thought his father had died ignobly and blamed me for it. Maybe he even blamed or despised me for sparing his life. I myself was not sure how to treat him, as the heir to a mighty warlord, or as the son of the man who had betrayed me. I thought it best for him to be kept out of my way for the time being, and put him in the service of Endo Chikara's family. I still hoped his mother, Shizuka, was alive. When she returned, we would discuss her son's future. Taku I had no doubts about. I would keep him with me, the first of the child spies I had dreamed of training and employing. The district around my old house had been hardly touched by the earthquake, and birds were singing blithely in the gardens. As we walked through it, I was thinking about how I used to wait for the exact moment when I heard the house's song of the river and the world, and remembering how I had first seen Kenji on the corner. The song was altered now. The stream was clogged, the waterfall dry, but the river still lapped at the dock and the wall. Haruka found the last of the wild flowers and a few chrysanthemums to put in buckets outside the kitchen, as she always had, and their sharp autumn scent mingled with the smell of mud and decay from the river. The garden was ruined, the fish all dead, but Chiyo had washed and polished the nightingale floor, and when we stepped onto it, it sang beneath our feet. The downstairs rooms were damaged by water and mud, and she had already started stripping them and having new mats laid, but the upstairs room was untouched. She had cleaned and polished it until it looked just as it had the first time I had seen it, when I had fallen in love with Shigeru's house and with him. Chio apologized that there was no hot water for a bath, but we washed in cold water, and she managed to find enough food for an adequate meal, as well as several flasks of wine. We ate in the upper room, as we so often had before, and Kenji made Taku laugh by describing my poor efforts as a student and how impossible and disobedient I had been. I was filled with an almost unbearable mixture of sorrow and joy, and smiled with tears in my eyes. But whatever my grief, I felt Shigeru's spirit was at peace. I could almost see his quiet ghost in the room with us, smiling when we smiled. His murderers were dead, and Jato had come home. Taku fell asleep at last, and Kenji and I shared one more flask of wine as we watched the gibbous moon move across the garden. It was a cold night. There would probably be a frost, and we closed the shutters before going to bed ourselves. I slept restlessly, no doubt from the wine, and woke just before dawn, thinking I had heard some unfamiliar sound. The house lay quiet around me. I could hear Kenji and Taku breathing alongside me, and Chio and Haruka in the room below. We had put guards on the gate, and there were still a couple of dogs there. I thought I could hear the guards talking in low voices. Perhaps it was they who had awakened me. I lay and listened for a while. The room began to lighten as day broke. I decided I had heard nothing unusual and would go to the privy before I tried to sleep for another hour or two. I got up quietly and crept down the stairs, slid open the door, and stepped outside. I did not bother masking my footsteps, but as soon as the floor sang, I realized what it was I had heard. One light step onto the boards. Someone had tried to come into the house and had been discouraged by the floor. So where was he now? I was thinking rapidly. I should wake Kenji, should at least get a weapon, when the Kikuta master, Kotaro, came out of the misty garden and stood in front of me. Until tonight, I had seen him only in his faded blue robes, the disguise he wore when travelling. Now he was in the dark fighting clothes of the tribe, and all the power that he usually kept hidden was revealed in his stance and in his face, the embodiment of the tribe's hostility towards me, expert, ruthless, and implacable. He said, "I believe your life is forfeit to me. You broke faith with me by ordering Akio to kill me," I said. "All our bargains were annulled then, and you had no right to demand anything from me when you did not tell me it was you who killed my father." He smiled in contempt. "You're right. I did kill Osamu," he said. "I have learned now what it was that made him disobedient too. The Autori blood that flows in you both." He reached into his jacket, and I moved quickly to avoid the knife I thought was coming. But what he held out was a small stick. "I drew this," he said, "and I obeyed the orders of the tribe, even though Isamu and I were cousins and friends, and even though he refused to defend himself. That's what obedience is." Kotaro's eyes were fixed on my face, and I knew he was hoping to confuse me with the Kikuta sleep, but I was certain I could withstand it, though I doubted I could use it on him as I had once before in Matsue. We held each other's gaze for several moments, neither of us able to dominate. "You murdered him," I said. "You contributed to Shigeru's death too. And what purpose did Yuki's death serve?" He hissed impatiently, in the way I remembered, and with a lightning movement threw the stick to the ground and drew a knife. I dived sideways, shouting loudly. I had no illusions about my ability to take him on alone and unarmed. I would have to fight barehanded, as I had with Akio, until someone came to my help. He jumped after me, feinting at me, and then moved faster than the eye could follow in the opposite direction to take my neck in a stranglehold. But I'd anticipated the move, slipped under his grasp, and kicked at him from behind. I caught him just over the kidney and heard him grunt. Then I leapt above him and with my right hand hit him in the neck. The knife came upwards and I felt it slash deep into the side of my right hand, taking off the two smallest fingers and opening up the palm. It was my first real wound and the pain was terrible, worse than anything I'd ever experienced. I went invisible for a moment, but my blood betrayed me, spurting across the nightingale floor. I shouted again, screaming for Kenji, for the guards, and split myself. The second self rolled across the floor while I drove my left hand into Kotaro's eyes. His head snapped sideways as he avoided the blow, and I kicked at the hand that held the knife. He leapt away with unbelievable speed, and then seemed to fly back at my head. I ducked just before he could kick me in the head, and leapt into the air as he landed, all this time fighting off shock and pain, knowing that if I gave in to them for a moment, I would die. I was about to try to kick him in a similar way, when I heard the upstairs window open, and a small invisible object came hurtling out. Kotaro was not expecting it, and he heard it a second after I did. By then I had perceived it to be Taku. I leapt to break his fall, but he seemed almost to fly down onto Kotaro, distracting him momentarily. I turned my leap into a kick and rammed my foot hard into Kotaro's neck. As I landed, Kenji shouted from above, "Takeo, here!" and threw Jato down to me. I caught my sword in my left hand. Kotaro grabbed Taku, swung him above his head, and hurled him into the garden. I heard the boy gasp as he landed. I swung Jato above my head, but my right hand was pouring blood, and the blade descended crookedly. Kotaro went invisible as I missed him. But now that I was armed, he was more wary of me. I had a moment's breathing space. I tore off my sash and wound it around my palm. Kenji leapt from the upstairs window, landed on his feet like a cat, and immediately went invisible. I could discern the two masters faintly, and they could obviously see each other. I had fought alongside Kenji before, and I knew, if anyone did, how truly dangerous he was. But I realized I had never seen him in action against anyone who had a fraction of his skills. He had a sword a little longer than Kotaro's knife, and it gave him a slight advantage, but Kotaro was both brilliant and desperate. They drove each other up and down the floor, and it cried out under their feet. Kotaro seemed to stumble, but as Kenji closed in on him, he recovered and kicked him in the ribs. They both split their images. I lunged at Kotaro's second self as Kenji somersaulted away from him. Kotaro turned to deal with me, and I heard the whistling sound of throwing knives. Kenji had hurled them at his neck. The first blade penetrated, and I saw Kotaro's vision begin to waver. His eyes were fixed on my face. He made one last vain thrust with his knife, but Chateau seemed to anticipate it, and found its way into his throat. He tried to curse me as he died, but his windpipe was slashed, and only blood came bubbling out, obscuring the words. By now, the sun had risen. When we gazed down on Kotaro's broken, bleeding body in its pale light, it was hard to believe that such a fragile human being had wielded so much power. Kenji and I had only just managed to overcome him between us, and he had left me with a ruined hand, Kenji with terrible bruises, and, we found out later, broken ribs. Taku was winded and shaken, lucky to still be alive. The guards who had come running at my shouts were as shocked as if a demon had attacked us. The dogs' hackles rose when they sniffed around the body, and they showed their teeth in uneasy snarls. My fingers were gone. My palm was torn open. Once the terror and thrill of the fight had subsided, the pain truly made itself felt, turning me faint. Kenji said, "The knife blade was probably poisoned. We should take your hand off at the elbow to save your life." I was light-headed with shock, and at first thought he was joking. But his face was serious, and his voice alarmed. I made him promise he would not do it. I would rather be dead than lose what was left of my right hand. As it was, I thought I would never hold a sword or brush again. He washed the wound at once, told Chio to bring coals, and, while the guards knelt on me to hold me still, seared the stumps of the fingers and the edges of the wound, and then bound it with what he said he hoped was an antidote. The blade was indeed poisoned, and I fell into hell, a confusion of pain and fever and despair. As the long tormented days passed, I was aware that everyone thought I was dying. I did not believe I would die, but I could not speak to reassure the living. Instead, I lay in the upstairs room, thrashing and sweating and babbling to the dead. They filed past me, those I had killed, those who had died for me, those I had avenged. My family in Mino, the hidden at Yamagata, Shigeru, Ichiro, the men I had murdered on the tribe's orders, Yuki, Amano, Jiro, Joanne. I longed for them to be alive again. I longed to see them in the flesh and hear their living voices. One by one they bade me farewell and left me, desolate and alone. I wanted to follow them, but I could not find the road they had taken. At the worst point of the fever, I opened my eyes and saw a man in the room. I had never seen him before, but I knew he was my father. He wore peasant's clothes like the men of my village, and he carried no weapons. The walls faded away, and I was in Mino again. The village was unburned, and the rice fields were brilliant green. I watched my father working in the fields, absorbed and peaceful. I followed him up the mountain path and into the forest, and I knew how much he loved to roam there among its animals and plants, for it was what I loved too. I saw him turn his head and listen in the familiar Kikuta way as he caught some distant noise. In a moment you would recognize the step. His cousin and friend who was coming to execute him. I saw Kotaro appear on the path in front of him. He was dressed in the dark fighting clothes of the tribe, as he had been when he came for me. The two men stood as if frozen before me, each with their distinctive stance. My father, who had taken a vow never to kill again, and the future Kikuta master, who lived by the trade of death and terror. As Kotaro drew his knife, I screamed out a warning. I tried to rise, but hands held me back. The vision faded, leaving me in anguish. I knew that I could not change the past, but I was aware, with the intensity of fever, that the conflict was still unresolved. However much men craved an end to violence, it seemed they could not escape it. It would go on and on forever, unless I found a middle way, a way to bring peace, and the only way I could think of was to reserve all violence to myself, in the name of my country and my people. I would have to continue on my violent path, so that everyone else could live free of it, just as I had to believe in nothing, so everyone else was free to believe in what they wanted. I did not want that. I wanted to follow my father and forswear killing, living in the way my mother had taught me. The darkness rose around me, and I knew that if I surrendered to it, I could go after my father, and the conflict would be ended for me. The thinnest of veils separated me from the next world, but a voice was echoing through the shadows. Your life is not your own. Peace comes at the price of bloodshed. Behind the holy woman's words, I heard Makoto calling my name. I did not know if he was dead or alive. I wanted to explain to him what I had learned and how I could not bear to act as I knew I would have to, and so I was leaving with my father. But when I tried to speak, my swollen tongue would not frame the words. They came out as nonsense, and I writhed in frustration, thinking we would be parted before I could talk to him. He was holding my hands firmly. He leaned close and spoke clearly to me. Takeo, I know. I understand. It's all right. We will have peace, but only you can bring it. You must not die. Stay with us. You have to stay with us for the sake of peace. He talked to me like this for the rest of the night, his voice keeping the ghosts at bay and linking my spirit with this world. Dawn came and the fever broke. I slept deeply, and when I awoke, lucidity had returned. Makoto was still there, and I wept for joy that he was alive. My hand still throbbed, but with the ordinary pain of healing, not with the ferocious agony of the poison. Kenji told me later he thought something must have come from my father, some immunity in the master poisoner's blood that protected me. It was then I repeated to him the words of the prophecy, how my own son was destined to kill me, and how I did not believe I would die before then. He was silent for a long time. Well, he said finally, that must lie a long way in the future. We will deal with it when it comes. My son was Kenji's grandson. The prophecy seemed even more unbearably cruel to me. I was still weak and the tears came easily. My body's frailty infuriated me. It was 7 days before I could walk outside to the privy, 15 before I could get on a horse again. The full moon of the 11th month came and went. Soon it would be solstice, and then the year would turn, the snows would come. My hand began to heal. The wide, ugly scar almost obliterated both the silvery mark from the burn I received the day Shigeru saved my life, and the straight line of the Kikuta. Makoto sat with me day and night, but said little to me. I felt he was keeping something from me, and that Kenji also knew what it was. Once they brought Hiroshi to see me, I was relieved that the boy lived. He seemed cheerful, telling me about their journey, how they had escaped the worst of the earthquake, and had come upon the pathetic remnants of Arai's once mighty army, and how marvellous Shun had been, but I thought he was partially pretending. Sometimes Taku, who had aged years in a month, came to sit by me. Like Hiroshi, he acted cheerfully, but his face was pale and strained. As my strength returned, I realized we should have heard from Shizuka. Obviously, everyone feared the worst, but I did not believe she was dead, nor Keide, for neither of them had visited me in my delirium. Finally, one evening, Makoto said to me, "We have had news from the south. The damage from the earthquake was even more severe there. At Lord Fujiwara's there was a terrible fire." He took my hand. "I'm sorry, Takeo. It seems no one survived." "Fujiwara is dead?" "Yes, his death is confirmed." He paused and added quietly, "Kondo Kiichi died there." Kondo, whom I had sent with Shizuka. "And your friend?" I asked. "He also. Poor Mamoru. I think he would almost have welcomed it." I said nothing for a few moments. Makoto said gently, "They have not found her body, but—" "I must know for sure," I said. "Will you go there for me?" He agreed to leave the next morning. I spent the night anguishing over what I would do if Keide was dead. My only desire would be to follow her, yet how could I desert all those who had stayed so loyally by me? By dawn I'd recognized the truth of Joanne's words and Makoto. My life was not my own. Only I could bring peace. I was condemned to live. During the night, something else occurred to me, and I asked to see Makoto before he left. I was worried about the records that Keide had taken to Shirakawa with her. If I was to live, I wanted to have them back in my possession before winter began. For I had to spend the long months in planning the summer's strategy. Those of my enemies who remained would not hesitate to use the tribe against me. I felt I would have to leave Hagi in the spring and impose my rule over the 3 countries, maybe even set up my headquarters in Inuyama and make it my capital. It made me smile half bitterly, for its name means Dog Mountain, and it was as if it had been waiting for me. I told Makoto to take Hiroshi with him. The boy would show him where the records were hidden. Where the records were hidden. I could not suppress the fluttering hope that Keide would be back at Shirakawa, that Makoto would somehow bring her back to me. They returned on a bitterly cold day nearly 2 weeks later. I saw they were alone, and disappointment nearly overcame me. They were also empty-handed. The old woman who guards the shrine would give the records to no one but you, Makoto said. I'm sorry I could not persuade her otherwise. Hiroshi said eagerly, We will go back. I will go with Lord Otori. Yes, Lord Otori must go, Makoto said. He seemed to be going to speak again, but then fell silent. What? I prompted him. He was looking at me with a strange expression of compassion and pure affection. We will all go, he said. We will learn once and for all if there is any news of Lady Otori. I longed to go, yet feared it would be a useless journey, and that it was too late in the year. We run the risk of being caught by the snow, I said. I had planned to winter in Hagi. If worst comes to worst, you can stay in Teriyama. I am going there on the way back. I will be staying there, for I can see my time with you is drawing to a close. You're going to leave me? Why? I feel I have other work to do. You have achieved all that I set out to help you with. I am being called back to the temple. I was devastated. Was I to lose everyone I loved? I turned away to hide my feelings. When I thought you were dying, I made a vow, Makoto went on. I promised the Enlightened One that if you lived, I would devote my life to your cause in a different way. I've fought and killed alongside you, and I would gladly do it all over again. Except that it solves nothing in the end. Like the weasel's dance, the cycle of violence goes on and on. His words rang in my ears. They were exactly what had pounded in my brain while I was delirious. You talked in your fever about your father and about the command of the hidden, to take no one's life. As a warrior, it's hard for me to understand, but as a monk, it is a command that I feel I must try and follow. I vowed that night that I would never kill again. Instead, I will seek peace through prayer and meditation. I left my flutes at Teriyama to take up weapons. I will leave my weapons here and go back for them. He smiled slightly. When I speak the words, they sound like madness. I am taking the first step only on a long and difficult journey, but it is one I must take. It is one I must make. I said nothing in reply. I pictured the temple at Teriyama, where Shigeru and Takeshi were buried, where I had been sheltered and nurtured, where Kaede and I had been married. It lay in the center of the three countries, the physical and spiritual heart of my land and my life. And from now on Makoto would be there, praying for the peace I longed for, always upholding my cause. He would be one person, like a tiny splash of dye in a huge vat, but I could see the colour spreading over the years, the blue-green colour that the word peace always summoned up for me. Under Makoto's influence, the temple would become a place of peace, as its founder had intended it to be. I am not leaving you, he said gently. I will be with you in a different way. I had no words to express my gratitude. He had understood my conflict completely, and in this way was taking the first steps to resolve it. All I could do was thank him and let him go. Kenji, supported tacitly by Chiyo, argued strongly against my decision to travel, saying I was asking for trouble by undertaking such a journey before I was fully recovered. I felt better every day, and my hand had mostly healed, though it still pained me and I still felt my phantom fingers. I grieved for the loss of all my dexterity, and tried to accustom my left hand to the sword and the brush. But at least I held a horse's reins in that hand, and I thought I was well enough to ride. My main concern was that I was needed in the reconstruction of Hagi, but Miyoshi Kahei and his father assured me they could manage without me. Kahei and the rest of my army had been delayed with Makoto by the earthquake, but were unharmed by it. Their arrival had greatly increased our forces and hastened the town's recovery. I told Kahei to send messages as soon as possible to Shuho to invite the master carpenter Shiro and his family back to the clan. In the end, Kenji gave in and said, despite the considerable pain of his broken ribs, he would of course accompany me, since I'd shown myself unable to deal with Kotaro alone. I forgave him his sarcasm, glad to have him with me, and we took Taku as well, not wanting to leave him behind while he was so low in spirits. He and Hiroshi squabbled as usual, but Hiroshi had grown more patient and Taku less arrogant, and I could see a true friendship was developing between them. I also took as many men as we could spare from the town and left them in groups along the road to help rebuild the stricken villages and farms. The earthquake had cut a swath from north to south, and we followed its line. It was close to midwinter. Despite the loss and destruction, people were getting ready for the New Year's celebration. Their lives were starting again. The days were frosty but clear, the landscape bare and wintering. Snipe called from the marshes, and the colours were grey and muted. We rode directly south, and in the evenings the sun sank red in the west, the only colour in a dulled world. The nights were intensely cold with huge stars, and every morning was white with frost. I knew Makoto was keeping some secret from me, but could not tell if it was to be a happy one or not. Every day he seemed to shine more with some inner anticipation. My own spirits were still volatile. I was pleased to be riding Shun again, but the cold and the hardship of the journey, together with the pain and disability in my hand, were more draining than I thought they would be. And at night, the task in front of me seemed too immense for me to ever achieve, especially if I was to attempt it without Keide. On the 7th day we came to Shirakawa. The sky had clouded over, and the whole world seemed grey. Keide's home was in ruins and deserted. The house had burned, and there was nothing left of it but charred beams and ashes. It looked unutterably mournful. I imagined Fujiwara's residence would look the same. I had a serious premonition that she was dead, and that Makoto was taking me to her grave. A shrike scolded us from the burned trunk of a tree by the gate, and in the rice fields 2 crested ibis were feeding, their pink plumage glowing in the forlorn landscape. However, as we rode away past the water meadows, Hiroshi called to me, "Lord Otori, look!" 2 brown mares were trotting towards us, whinnying to our horses. They both had foals at foot, 3 months old, I reckoned, their brown baby hair just beginning to give way to grey. They had manes and tails as black as lacquer. "They are Raku's colts," Hiroshi said. "Amano told me that Shirakawa mares were in foal to him." I could not stop looking at them. They seemed like an inexpressibly precious gift from heaven, from life itself, a promise of renewal and rebirth. "One of them will be yours," I said to Hiroshi. "You deserve it for your loyalty to me." "Can the other one go to Taku?" Hiroshi begged. "Of course." The boys yelped with delight. I told the grooms to bring the mares with us, and the foals gambolled after them, cheering me enormously as we followed Hiroshi's lead, riding on along the Shirakawa to the sacred caves. I had never been there before, and was unprepared for the size of the cavern from which the river flowed. The mountain loomed above, already snow-capped, reflected in the still black water of the winter river. Here, if anywhere, I could see, drawn by the hand of nature, the truth that it was all one. Earth, water, and sky lay together in unbroken harmony. It was like the moment at Terayama when I had been given a glimpse into the heart of truth. Now I saw heaven's nature revealed by earth. There was a small cottage at the river's edge just before the gates of the shrine. An old man came out at the sound of the horses, smiled in recognition at Makoto and Hiroshi, and bowed to us. "Welcome. Sit down. I'll make you some tea. Then I'll call my wife." "Lord Otori has come to collect the chests we left here," Hiroshi said importantly, and grinned at Makoto. Yes, I'll let them know. No man may go inside, but the women will come out to us." While he poured us tea, another man came out from the cottage and greeted us. He was middle-aged, kind, and intelligent-looking. I had no idea who he was, though I felt he knew me. He introduced himself to us as Ishida, and I gathered he was a doctor. While he talked to us about the history of the caves and the healing properties of the water, the old man went nimbly towards the entrance of the caves, jumping from boulder to boulder. A little way from it, a bronze bell hung from a wooden post. He swung the clapper against it, and its hollow note boomed over the water, echoing and reverberating from inside the mountain. I watched the old man and drank the steaming tea. He seemed to be peering and listening. After a few moments he turned and called, "Let Lord Otori only come thus far." I put down the bowl and stood up. The sun was just disappearing behind the western slope, and the shadow of the mountain fell on the water. As I followed the old man's steps and jumped from rock to rock, I thought I could feel something, someone drawing towards me. I stood next to the old man, next to the bell. He looked up at me and grinned, a smile of such openness and warmth, it nearly brought tears to my eyes. "Here comes my wife," he said. "She'll bring the chests." He chuckled and went on, "They've been waiting for you." I could see now into the gloom of the cavern. I could see the old shrine woman, dressed in white. I could hear her footsteps on the wet rock and the tread of the women following her. My blood was pounding in my ears. As they stepped out into the light, the old woman bowed to the ground and placed the chest at my feet. Shizuka was just behind her, carrying a second chest. "Lord Otori," she murmured. I hardly heard her. I did not look at either of them. I was staring past them at Keide. I knew it was her by the shape of her outline, but there was something changed about her. I did not recognize her. She had a cloth over her head, and as she came towards me, she let it fall to her shoulders. Her hair was gone, her head shorn. Her eyes were fixed on mine. Her face was unscarred and as beautiful as ever, but I hardly saw it. I gazed into her eyes, saw what she had suffered, and saw how it had refined and strengthened her. The Kikuta sleep would never touch her again. Still, without speaking, she turned and pulled the cloth from her shoulders. The nape of her neck, which had been so perfect, so white, was layered with scars of red and purple where her hair had burned her flesh. I placed my damaged hand over it, covering her scars with my own. We stood like that for a long time. I heard the harsh cry of the heron as it flew to its roost, the endless song of the water, and the quick beating of Keide's heart. We were sheltered under the overhang of the rock, and I did not notice that it had started snowing. When I looked out onto the landscape, it was already turning white as the first snow of winter drifted down upon it. On the banks of the river, the colts were snorting in amazement at the snow, the first they had seen. By the time the snow melted and spring came, their coats would be grey like raccoons. I prayed that spring would also bring healing to our scarred bodies, to our marriage, and to our land, and that spring would see the whole, the sacred bird of legend, return once more to the three countries. Afterward, the three countries have enjoyed nearly 15 years of peace and prosperity. Trade with the mainland and with the barbarians has made us rich. Inuyama, Yamagata, and Hagi have palaces and castles unequalled in the 8 islands. The court of the Otori, they say, rivals that of the emperor in splendor. There are always threats, powerful individuals like Arai Zenko within our borders, warlords beyond the three countries, the barbarians who would like to have a greater share of our wealth, even the emperor and his court who fear our rivalry. But until now, the 32nd year of my life, the 14th of my rule, we have been able to control all these with a mixture of strength and diplomacy. The Kikuta, led by Akio, have never given up their campaign against me, and my body now bears the record of their attempts to kill me. Our struggle against them goes on. We will never eradicate them completely, but the spies I maintain under Kenji and Taku keep them under control. Both Taku and Zenko are married and have children of their own. Zenko I married to my sister-in-law, Hannah, in an only partially successful attempt to bind him closer to me in alliance. His father's death lies between us, and I know he will overthrow me if he can. Hiroshi lived in my household until he was 20, and then returned to Maruyama, where he holds the domain in trust for my eldest daughter, who will inherit it from her mother. Keide and I have 3 daughters. The oldest is now 13, her twin sister's 11. Our first child looks exactly like her mother and shows no sign of any tribe skills. The twin girls are identical, even to the Kikuta lines on their palms. People are afraid of them, with reason. Kenji located my son 10 years ago when the boy was 5. Since then we keep an eye on him, but I will not allow anyone to harm him. I have thought long and often about the prophecy, and have come to the conclusion that, if this is to be my destiny, I cannot avoid it. And, if it is not, for prophecies, like prayers, fulfill themselves in unexpected ways, then the less I try to do about it, the better. And I cannot deny that, as the physical pain I suffer increases, and as I remember how I gave my adopted father, Shigeru, the swift and honourable death of a warrior, wiping out the insult and humiliation he had undergone at the hands of Aida Sadamu, the thought often comes to me that my son will bring me release, that death at his hands may be welcome to me. But my death is another tale of the Otori, and one that cannot be told by me. The end. Yay. That was Brilliance of the Moon by Leon Hearn. And that was the 3 Otori books. Clap. Thank you, Aska. I hope everyone's enjoyed the 3 books. That was good. Yeah. Well, I am certainly glad that he found Keide, and Keide found him. There are 2 more books. One is a prequel about Shigeru, and one is a sequel. I can't remember the sequel though. Actually, I can't remember the prequel, I just know it's got Shigeru in it. So I could read those next week. I could start reading them next week. Or I could read something else, depending. Oh, bang. Let me write. Oh my goodness. So how long was that? 2 hours, 2.5 hours. That's good. That's good. So, what are we doing? Look, Acid looks like she's finishing up. Ari is on a break by the looks of it. Pixel's going. Okay. We also have some Air Smartest going. Ivy Heels, Loaf. And we also have Emmy Cherry. Lots of options. Yeah, I'm glad. I'm very glad that Keide got out of that bloody house. Yeah. Just checking who's on. Oh, Acid's rating Ari, I bet. Bet Acid's rating Ari. Should bamboozle Ari with 2 raids. Maybe. Maybe not. Ari's cooking food. Wonder how long Ari's been cooking food. Roughly an hour. Okay, 10:30. It's 11:30. Literally any second. Okay, we'll probably raid someone else because I raided Ari yesterday. Oh, I might raid into Ari. Help me out, Asker. Decisions. I was going to raid Acid, but she's finishing. Perhaps Emmy Cherry? Yep, Emmy Cherry's good choice. Let's see what Emmy's doing. We'll raid Emmy. Okay. Good suggestion, Asker. Emmy's chatting about, I don't know, random things. Okay. So, yeah, I'm going to be stuffed tomorrow because I have to get up early and drive Dad somewhere. So, and I haven't had any sleep past 2 days because of the concreters. And yeah, so that's all fun. So I will definitely not be streaming tomorrow. So I will definitely see you next week for a new book. Perhaps one of the prequels or sequels. Perhaps a different book. I'm not sure. But I just want to say thank you for everyone who's been enjoying the story. Those 3 books really could have been 1 book, to be honest. Going to study? Okay, good idea. Go study. So, I'm just going to do the raid because my brain is brained out. I'm just reading for 2.5 hours. Raid. Emmy Cherry 4. Okay. We're raiding Emmy. Please join me for the raid. And if you don't vibe with Emmy, that's okay. I'll be heading off to Ari's shortly after anyway. And I will see you all next week for new book. Thank you for streaming. No, thank you for being here, Asker. Thank you very much. You're lovely. All right, everyone. Bye. Bye for now. Bye.